Hello and welcome to Hyperledger Global Forum in Dublin. I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Palatnick from DTCC. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Great. Rob, could you introduce yourself and your role at DTCC, please?
Sure. Rob Palatnick. I lead DTCC's Global Technology Research and Innovation Department. We're the spark plug for innovation across DTCC, and I work with the industry on new models for the financial industry to move forward.
Look, thank you very much. We're going to sit down and talk about open source and technology and Hyperledger, but to set the scene too, maybe for our audience too, your own role previously as chairman of the board of Hyperledger. It'd be great just to touch on that too, the scene set.
Sure. I was chair of the board of Hyperledger for 3 years, and that finished about 3 months ago. But really what I'm most proud of is being a founding member of Hyperledger. And in 2016, in January, just after Hyperledger was announced, we had and hosted the very first meetup of Hyperledger at DTCC's office in Jersey City. So getting people to come from New York City across the Hudson River to Jersey was a fairly large task, but seeing everyone together in the room, exchanging ideas, exchanging points of view in 2016 was brilliant.
Amazing. So let's talk about open source first. What is open source for finance and the adoption you've seen, and why is that important?
Well, the open source community, which has been around essentially since Linux came into being, and probably even before that, is a way of getting the entire global community to contribute to software, to contribute to the code, to contribute to the use of the code, to battle testing it, to hardening it, to improving it, to enhancing it, and developing all parts of that ecosystem. So I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but I think I saw there's over 70 million developers have been involved in open source one way or another. How's any company going to ever compete with that? And if you have that number of the people contributing code, improving code, testing it for security, testing it for performance and scale, testing it for bugs, you can't, if you try to code that yourself or spend your own money on building equivalent capabilities, you're never going to win.
Never going. So we've touched on what it is and why it's important for finance. It's a particular way maybe to outline for us of how it works and what you've seen since 2016 to here we are in 2022. What are the key recipes of why it works and why it's important and what are the benefits?
Well, specifically open source as it relates to distributed ledger and as it relates to Hyperledger. So in 2016, distributed ledger technology was basically a couple of ideas, often a couple of people in a phone booth or in a car with a laptop and a dog, but there were no working systems other than Bitcoin, essentially, and the very first year of Ethereum. But there were no working enterprise systems. There were a lot of ideas of what systems could look like. There were a lot of prototypes and discussions, and there were a real lot of white papers. Everyone had an idea, they wrote a white paper. Over the last 7 years, and it's been just about 7 years now, we've seen companies move from idea to concept, to a proof of that concept, to pilot, and then often that decision point of whether the idea is good enough that it brings business value and it makes sense for an industry to convert to this model, or it makes sense for a company to roll out this system, and in which case it went to production. Or we've also seen a large number of ideas killed because they didn't make any business sense. The technology may have worked, but the idea didn't make sense. Or in some cases, the idea made a lot of sense, but the technology could not perform at the level needed. So what we've seen is open source develop a lot of the capabilities, and Hyperledger in particular, develop a lot of the components to support business objectives.
And just to build on that, the technology the Hyperledger community is building, how is that advancing the financial system, and why is it so, useful to the financial enterprise firms? Some examples there would be great.
Sure. So Hyperledger, well, let's start with, I'll say, base principles. Financial transactions are typically, you are selling me something for value. And this goes on throughout the world. This has gone on mostly throughout history. I receive something of value, and you want payment for that. So that transaction has been recorded in various ways. Centuries and centuries ago, it was lines on sticks and possibly other forms of I'll say equivalent of currency. Then it became dollars. Assets, when companies issued stock certificates, they were exchanging a piece of paper that said you own 5 shares in a company, and that piece of paper became that instrument that said you had that value in that company. And now what blockchain enabled is the idea that that certificate, that piece of paper that said you own this value in something, that could be turned into a token, and that token can be recorded on this thing called a blockchain with privacy, so only you know what you have, and only the people who are allowed to know what you own can see what you own. With security, everything is encrypted. That encryption is built into the database, it's built into the model, and a accounting record of provenance. So every time that asset changes hands and every time money is paid as a result of that transaction, there's a recording of that in an irrefutable way. And the math associated with the blockchain technology makes sure that that lineage of history can't be changed, it can't be censored, it can't be faked. It's real and it can be proven. And that information is shared among everyone in a network.
Fantastic. And I've just got 2 more quick questions as well, Rob. What do you value about being part of this Hyperledger community? What would you say is unique about the Hyperledger Foundation and its community?
The biggest thing to me about the Hyperledger Foundation and what it brings to the industry, but when I say the industry, it's being used in music, it's being used in energy, it's being used in healthcare, it's being used in automobiles, it's being used in airline parts, it's being used in many different industries. What it brings is its openness, not just to different types of software, but to different stacks, to different ideas, to different technologies, to the entire community on what is the right solution. There are a lot of alternative models for blockchain and distributed ledger that are owned by a company, and sometimes that company will create an open source version of the software, and the idea of that open source version is a teaser. It's to get you to use it, but it's stripped down, it doesn't scale, it can't do enterprise functions, it can't perform at what an enterprise needs their software to perform at. So they bring you in using the open source, but then they charge you that commercial toll. This technology, it's distributed, it's decentralized. The whole idea is to build trust into the technology, and now you're going to trust one company to support that entire ecosystem. It makes no sense. So the software, especially for blockchain, has to be supported by open source. That's the only way that distributed trust model can actually work. And the fact that you have so many contributors to Hyperledger and that we are open to all voices and all ideas means we get the best and brightest coming into Hyperledger to help build that level of capability, to help the enterprises level up to the best possible solutions, and keep advancing the industry the way it's supposed to advance.
I've got you here, DTCC, Hyperledger 2016, you kind of fast forward to 2022. Is there one particular project that's caught your eye this year, a particular thing happening you'd like to highlight for our audience?
One particular project is probably hard for me to point at. I can say DTCC is live with blockchain. We've got at least 3 other projects in the hopper that are moving in different levels or different stages to production. We have seen central bank digital currency systems go live throughout the world, at least starting in some of the smaller countries with lower volume, but that seems to be spreading. And we have seen distributed ledger solutions in multiple industries bringing value.
Amazing.
So I think it's not a single thing that excites me. It's that volume, that tide that's lifting all ships. And it's just, I think, going to build on itself in a virtuous cycle where everyone says, wow, that industry is doing it, these fintechs are doing it, these companies are doing it, and they're getting value and improving their capabilities and meeting some business needs that weren't met before. We need to get on that.
Brilliant. So I've got one final question, just a 60-second question. If there's one thing you'd like the audience to take away from everything we've covered in our chat today, from open source adoption to some of these challenges that are happening with blockchain and adoption across the industry, if there's one thing you'd like the audience to take away, Rob, what would it be?
The takeaway would really be to get involved, to contribute, to come to Hyperledger events, to come onto the Hyperledger site. There's a whole set of guides and web pages that say exactly how to get involved in the community, how you can listen to information and use the software, how you can contribute to the software, how you can contribute ideas, how you can get involved in the committees, how you can contribute to documentation. So there's this whole range of ways you can get involved, and that would be my one takeaway.
Your one takeaway.
Come on in.
Excellent, excellent. Rob, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Pleasure, Mike.